A fraud, afraid, worthless, frightened. Does anybody recognize these feelings? Does anybody ever feel these at work, that you're on the verge of being found out? That this is imposter syndrome? Raise your hands if you've ever felt anything like this. I see we have some imposters in the room, which is great. The thing is, our industry is probably the most exciting industry in the world. We work in a field that affects what millions of people do, how they work, how they share, how they communicate. Coming to work in this environment should feel great. It should feel like we have won the lottery, we are in our dream jobs. And in order to feel really great about our jobs, we should be feeling challenged. This idea that yoga has, that you work at your edge. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. That you work at your edge. There's an atmosphere of growth, of excitement, of possibilities. We want to feel safe so that we can take advantage of these challenges and we can do them in a way that will not expose us and will not make us feel threatened in any way. We want to be able to do our best work. And above all, to be really happy in what we do and to be successful and to be productive, we need to feel that we are our authentic selves. But often, instead of feeling challenged, we find ourselves feeling overwhelmed. Instead of feeling safe, we feel threatened and afraid that we're going to be found out. And instead of feeling that we are able to be true to our authentic selves, we have this sneaking suspicion that in fact we are imposters. Imposter syndrome is toxic. It challenges our very sense of self-worth. And often this happens when we believe our value comes from skills and knowledge that are not valued by the people we work with. I think imposter syndrome is endemic in tech culture, and we probably should think about why that is. Let's look at the old world of tech writing. There's been a lot of discussion, write the docs, about old versus new tech writing, and the old model, it was very much almost an industrial model of product creation. There were multiple disciplines and each of them worked at a different piece of the whole, often disconnected and sometimes even in conflict with the others. In this world, this is something I experienced like 20 years ago. The PM wrote the specs and delivered them to Eng. The engineers designed and built the codes, and eventually they would hand off some early builds to tech writers, and the tech writers had to work against the clock without much support to deliver the documentation. And this model was not only very fragmented compared with what we're facing today, but the approach often became even adversarial. So, for example, it was very traditional in environments I was in that engineers would perceive PMs as making unreasonable demands, and it became the engineering role to push back on these demands from product management for these new features. And often tech writers were asked for these impossible deliverables, and we had to push back against this. We were almost rewarded for resisting things and for kind of not trying to make our work manageable. Sometimes it seemed almost like a zero-sum game. In order to be successful, writers needed to be able to spend time with engineers, but in order to be successful, engineers wanted to spend their time coding. The problem was that their perception of the value of our work did not always match ours. And in this old technical writing model, each discipline has different goals and priorities, and these goals and priorities are defined by their job title. But the problem is that defining what we do by our job title, or determining what we do by our job title, is actually really limiting to us in our growth, and it impacts our flexibility and our effectiveness. How's that? Okay? And it can cause a number of symptoms that really contribute to imposter syndrome. The first real problem of the world of technical writing is that it's really hard to know when you're done. it can always be better. And I want to tell a story that my sister is an academic psychologist, and her area is elite performance. And she did this one study. She's very interested in flow. So she studied a lot of very elite performers, musicians, athletes, ballerinas, ballet dancers. And she asked them all the same thing. Tell me about a time you did something really well. What did it feel like? And the athletes' faces would light up and they'd say, it was magical. I couldn't fail. The ball seemed to find my foot. It was like all my training and effort disappeared and I was in the zone. The musicians said the same thing. They were like, my keys flew over the keyboard. It was like I was just one with the music. It was a really amazing experience. But what my sister said was that every single dancer she spoke to, she would say, tell me about a time you did something well. And every single dancer, these are people at the top of their careers, every single dancer said, I've never done anything really well. And that is a terribly hard way to live. But that's how you live when you have no clear finishing line, where there's no clear-cut point at which you can say, I am successful. In this world, like a ballet dancer, like a gymnast waiting for the scores, you depend on subjective feedback of others. And that means you can always be better. You can never be good enough. Technical writing has no finish line. Usually we have to hand things off before we're happy with them. And docs can always be improved, but also not in a measurable way sometimes. Nobody is going to say, this document is 100% engaging. Nobody is going to say, this is 38% friendlier in voice. You know, so we end up deriving our self-worth from how we think we are perceived by other people. And the second problem is that when our sense of self-worth is challenged in this way, we feel threatened, and we often retreat into very familiar and really self-sabotaging behaviors. And the first one I want to talk about is procrastination, because I actually think procrastination is our greatest enemy. The only thing procrastination achieves is it prolongs that vague sense of dread and unease you have about the work that you're doing. But why do we don't procrastinate about putting something on Instagram. We don't procrastinate about updating our Facebook status. We procrastinate about stuff that is most important, about the things that really matter to us. And I believe there are a few reasons for that. And the easiest answer is doing this work and sending it out into the world. In our technical culture, our work is under constant review. And sending it out there and doing it means that we are exposing ourselves to criticism or judgment. And when you have imposter syndrome, that is something that unconsciously or consciously we are trying to postpone. But actually, I think there's another reason about procrastination. Procrastination is our worst enemy, but procrastination in certain ways is the imposter's best friend. It's our secret weapon, and it's how we can preserve our sense of self-worth. If I put something off to the last minute, and then I end up pulling an all-nighter, and I do it, and I deliver it, you know, I'm amazing, I can relax, I save the day, will not be fired in the morning. If the project fails, you know, it's not because I'm dumb, it's not because I'm stupid, it's because I left it too late and I didn't have enough time. With procrastination, it's a win-win. We come out, am I right? The other problem though, so when we feel threatened like this, we procrastinate, but we also tend to become inflexible and tend to become closed to new ideas or approaches or experiences. When we're highly stressed or anxious, we get this fight or flight response, and it's physiological, we can't help it. On the savannah, the lion would pick off the weakest gazelle and would be gone, and we would be relaxed in 5 minutes. But in our world, it's much more pervasive and long-running. The world becomes a really fearful place, and the workplace becomes fearful, and we react accordingly. We react in a very logical way. We can become defensive. We can retreat, And we can fall into the trap of focusing exactly on the stuff that we know we are already good at, that we know we do better than anybody else on our teams. And that's the traditional documentation model. The thing. We know about prose style. We know about document structure. This is our comfort zone. And outside of our comfort zone, when we go outside there, we risk making mistakes. And mistakes mean that we are not good enough. To which I say poppycock. Poppycock. Making a mistake does not mean we are bad. You know, maybe the answer is uncomfortable. Maybe our project failed because we weren't prepared enough. Maybe it was because we didn't foresee some eventuality that was, you know, very likely. Maybe we didn't get the feedback from the right teams. Maybe it was something entirely out of our control. None of these things should affect our sense of self or our sense of value. These are all things we can learn from and address and get better at tomorrow. This is how we grow. The answer is to just recognize the mistake, learn how to avoid it happening again, and then move on. Because risk avoidance in this world of new technical writing and changing work practices is probably the biggest threat we face. For example, let's look at this guy. This giant panda, hugely successful animal, biggest, no natural predators, biggest animal in the block, surrounded by all the bamboo he could want, until there is no more bamboo. And the problem with the panda is that he is super specialized. And when the bamboo goes away, there's nothing he can do. And as tech writers, our environment is changing. But by the nature of our industry, we don't really know where it's going. I can't tell you what it's going to be like. Nobody here can tell you what it's going to be like. But we do know this, and this I really do believe. When there are times of change and great upheaval, the advantage belongs not to the specialist. It belongs to the adaptive generalist. It belongs not to the panda. It belongs to the urban crow. A smart scavenger who isn't picky, is willing to try everything once and now dominates every city in the world. So when we are exhibiting, when we're threatened and we retreat into our comfort zone and we have panda-like inflexibility, it's very easy to stick to a well-worn path for safety. We can ignore opportunities that come up along the way. We're very focused on the end goal. But what if there's a different way? Is there a way that we can reset how we think so that these things that we perceive as threats, they're actually challenges? And challenges are fun and exciting. They are not frightening. What if, instead of defining ourselves by our job titles, what if we said to ourselves, my sense of self-worth, it's not derived from my title or my level or by how I am perceived. These things do not define me. What if instead we focus on much more important things, our values and our actions? What if we think that my self-worth, it derives from my actions and these actions are driven by my values? This sounds quite meta, but actually I think it's a really practical way of determining both your long and short-term goals. In her book, has anyone read Gretchen Rubin's book, The Happiness Project? And in that, she does a lot of hacks about feeling happy, but she believes that the key to feeling happy, to feel happy, we need to think about feeling good, feeling bad, and feeling right. And we need to do that in an atmosphere of growth. When we act in accordance with our values, it feels good, it feels right. Confession time. I am a mostly neurotypical female primate, and therefore it's very important to me that people like me, and one of my greatest fears was that people would not like me. Probably still is a little bit. And there have been times I'm not proud of when this fear caused me to act out of sync with my values. It felt terrible. Even if there were temporary things that felt good about it, acceptance by groups or whatever. But sometimes when I've acted in accordance with my values, sometimes it feels bad. Sometimes there's conflicts, or sometimes people don't like me, or I fail. But when I've acted in accordance with my values, it feels right, and that's really important. So values help you decide on both your long-term and short-term goals, and when you reach a decision point, they guide your next action. And this is really important in our changing world. What's the world's silliest interview question? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? In the old world, I might answer, I want to be editor of the Washington Post. I want to be chief of medicine at the Mayo Clinic. I want to be senior tech writer at a very large and influential tech company. These types of career goals don't make that much sense anymore. Our paths are no longer linear. Nobody stays in the same job for their career, but when you live, our paths are no longer linear. So having this very straight, focused goal, this straight road onto the horizon, it's setting ourselves up for disappointment. But when we approach our work according to our values, and we're open to possibilities, so many more opportunities open up. Instead of being editor of the Washington Post, maybe my values are that I want to hold the establishment accountable. I want to hold their feet to the fire. So when my newspaper world goes belly up, I start a highly successful news blog. Maybe I say I want to be chief of medicine, but actually my value is that I want to save lives. And when opportunities come up, maybe I find myself in Médecins Sans Frontières, maybe I end up in research, who knows? But I'm saving lives, I'm acting in accordance to my values. Instead of saying I want to be recognized as a senior or whatever tech writer, the tech writer of the world, maybe our value is I want to use my writing and information skills to make software better and easier to use. Where will that lead us? I have no idea, but the journey is the destination. And whenever on this winding path we come to a crossroads, if we rely on our values, it'll help us make the right decision. And once we do that, things can start getting real. When you focus, the great advantage is that when you focus on what you do instead of what you are, life becomes much, much simpler and more satisfying. Think of it as a dialogue between your inner voice that talks about imposter syndrome and your authentic self. Your inner voice might say, you're a technical writer. You should deliver technical documentation, you're good at it and you know how to do it. You shouldn't try these new things. Your authentic self might say, as a technical writer, I believe that my contribution is to help my team meet our project goals. Therefore, I work with them to identify the requirements and I use my creativity and skill to solve these problems for my team. Your inner voice might say, your project didn't do well because you're a bad writer, you're incompetent. Your authentic self might say, I should have done this differently. I'll add that to my checklist for next time. I'll make better mistakes tomorrow. Your inner voice might say, this approach is too risky. Your authentic self might say, you know, it's risky, but the data indicates, I have good data that indicates this is a problem that we should be solving. And you know what? I've created a mock to share with the team and gather feedback. Inner voice, feedback's scary. Can we put it off a bit? Authentic self, it is scary. It's hard to have your work put apart. But it's good that our team has so many diverse viewpoints. Look at this updated mock. It's so much better after having everybody's feedback. Okay, clicker's not working. So in the old, what does it look like now in this new world? In the old tech writing world, it was very hierarchical, as we saw, and tech writers would go to teams, what do you need? We need this, please give it to us, and we would go away and do it and do a beautiful job. But it was a very top-down, service-oriented way of working. In the new world, maybe what we say instead, we go to the team and say, what are our goals? What do we need to do and how will we know when we've achieved them? Maybe our goals are to reduce the cost of user support. Maybe we need to grow adoption. Maybe we need to get people up and running faster time to hello world. In this model, we might deliver some traditional tech writer projects, and we probably always will, but we may also do some things that are new to us. We may look at data and interact with the UX team to tweak the information flow, identify where people are falling out. We can coordinate with marketing to create a blog that raises product awareness. These might be new things for us, but these are goals and tasks that are aligned with our team as a whole. And when we do this, when we work to identify and do the things that need doing, rather than the things that technical writers have always done, or the things that technical writers do, it can be a game changer. It changes the whole approach to work and to your team. We can gain agency, we can be more in control of our own lives, and we gain influence. We feel valued. Because our goals are aligned now, instead of being judged like a gymnast and waiting for external feedback, we share a finish line with our team. In this goal, maybe engineers remove some of the bugs, UX improves the workflow, and your new document provides an end-to-end scenario that gets users up and running. Adoption grows, successes are shared and celebrated, and your impact is clear. You don't have to justify your existence. This feels good. It feels right. It feels fun. It feels authentic and safe. You can do that. So how do we actually do this? How do we break out of the things, if we're experiencing imposter syndrome, that can hold us back? We probably will never break out of them entirely, but I think we can start to rein it in so that it doesn't dominate us entirely. So the first thing, it's starting at the highest level, it's let's identify your personal goals. Instead of thinking, I want to be editor of the New York Times, think about, I want to make information available. This is what I want to do. To be or to do trumps to be. Instead of thinking about your values, do you want to do things right, the established way that people have always done them, or do you want to do things the right thing, the thing that your team and your project actually needs? Name it, tame it. That's the next thing. The biggest enemy is this vague cloud of dread. Just really digging down and identifying the cause of your discomfort, pinning it down and putting a name on it, makes it so much easier to handle. It becomes something you can actually do about it. If you think you're not good enough, listen to some of the objective evidence. Look at your resume. Look at your performance review. Look at all these things. If you're worried that people won't like you, sometimes that's inevitable, but often it's not. Maybe she's not liking you because she's also suffering from imposter syndrome and is threatened. Instead of thinking it's a stupid idea, think, is this a good idea? How can I validate it? You know? And when you focus on the actual needs and requirements of your project, it becomes so much easier to make a decision. It becomes so much easier to decide what to do, to deliver it, and to be recognized and valued for it. The final thing, you really need to assess your skills. And some of the issues here are, do you have these skills yourself? The answer actually may be no. And sometimes the answer is to find somebody to partner with. The hard thing to know is that sometimes you just might be in the wrong job, but I think that is not, you pass the interview, you do well, you do all of this. It's mostly to do with confidence, although I have been in the wrong job, and I did have to take a look and say, I'm moving on. I wanted to subtitle this talk, I made a career full of mistakes, so you don't have to. The next thing, seriously, take action. Do it now. It doesn't matter how big the step is. It's always better to move forward. The smallest action can start to dissolve that cloud of dread. And the single most useful tip, and the one I use every day, is Annie Lamott, the writer Annie Lamott. She has a great piece about write the shitty first draft. It's just get it out on paper, it's a starting point. Share it, get it, it will be better. But moving forward, the tiniest action is better than inaction. And when you focus on this, You learn a lot of things. Forgiveness trumps permission. When you act, but you'll also find that when you act like this, when you do what needs to be done, often you need neither forgiveness nor permission. Risk. Try not to be risk aversion. We often have a same response to new opportunities. It's a mixture of intrigue, that sounds interesting, and anxiety. Things are great where I am, why risk it? Over time, we tend to get into a groove and have a pattern of responses to opportunities. And that limits how we can grow, it limits where we can go, and it limits our opportunities. Reasonable risk-taking increases your self-confidence, and it makes us more likely to take reasonable risks in the future. And one of the really important things is, a piece went around the internet a year ago about a hospice nurse who had seen many people die, and she wrote a piece how universally the things we regret are not our mistakes. We regret the risks we didn't take. I wish I'd taken a year off and backpacked around Asia. I wish I'd kissed that person. I wish I had tried to play the ukulele. You know? So mistakes are so much better than regrets. That's what you don't want. And the final thing is to embrace your difference. I think one of the things that makes imposter syndrome very common among technical writers is that often we come from a non-traditional computer science, technical engineering background. And so because our work is under review by people that we think are better than us. But that's okay. Being an outsider, if indeed we are, actually brings real advantages. You can bring a different form of insight. You can bring apophenia, my new favorite word, which is that amazing feeling when you see the connections between things that were originally disjointed. So I want to play just a very short clip. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Luckily, I have queried this several. Tom Hanks is a little boy in a man's body, and he goes to this new company, and it's a toy company, and he's there in this room full of people presenting graphs and numbers and marketing stories, and they have this ridiculous toy that they think is going to change the world, and everybody claps and applauds and loves this marketing plan, except Tom Hanks puts up his hand and goes, I don't get it. And they're like, what do you not get? Because they're already below opinion of him. And he's like, this is no fun. Where's the fun in this? Couldn't it be like something that turns into a bug? You know? And as a result, he wins at the imposter game. This is a Japanese bowl. This is a picture of a tradition that's called Kinsuki. And in this Japanese tradition, when ceramics, beautiful ceramics are broken, the cracks are filled in with gold. And this process, it restores functionality to a broken vessel, but it also enhances its worth. The bowl is both stronger and more beautiful and more valuable for being cracked. It's far more precious than a bowl that is perfect and has never seen any damage. Imposter syndrome is toxic, but we can resolve to shed it. We can decide that we will judge our self-worth by our actions and our values. We'll forgive our mistakes, and we'll make better mistakes tomorrow. We're open to new possibilities. And we realize it's okay to be afraid. We do not have to be fearless. Fear is a rational response to many threats, but courage is doing the right thing anyway. And actually, I want to leave you with a quote that is very meaningful to me, but I think can really sum up the issues we have around perfectionism from the great Leonard Cohen. And he says, ring the bell that still can ring, forget your perfect offering, There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in.
Okay, yeah. So we've got 10 minutes until the next speaker. Talk amongst yourselves.